Yes. Okay, great. So welcome everybody again to TechPeaks Academy. This is the third session that we have with our mentors, and it's always exciting to see more and more things in culture happening. And this time is one of the most vertical, actually, talks that we're going to have since the beginning. It's going to be a talk on user experience and design in general. And our speaker today is Brian Kalma. He's one of our mentors. He's originally from New York and now based in Boston. And we're very excited to have him here from the US, all the way down to Trento. And so, right, so I'll give him the stage. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Brian.
You may want to take that back when we're done. I hope not. So, yeah, as Bella mentioned, I'm from New York and generally focus on design. And I spoke with many of you throughout the day today, and also presented to a bunch of you this morning. And when you may have taken away the fact that I have a unique design background, it's not like I was a born designer per se. I started off my career in marketing and advertising, and my foundation in advertising and branding has fundamentally shaped my point of view on what design really is. And first and foremost, the thing I want to say is, to me, design is a verb, not a noun. It's an action, it's not a thing. I don't believe in there being a design of anything. There is a process of design. And design is typically rooted in, either research or market knowledge or in something greater than the output of what the process typically yields. And today, we're going to focus largely on that. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about executional design principles, but really talking more about the groundwork, the early on thinking that people need to do to enable great design. It doesn't just happen. So I call it a foundation for an emotional experience, and you guys are my beta testers for this theory. It's something that I put into practice a lot, but I never took the time to try to organize it in a way that I would be able to communicate it to others. So feedback is very, very helpful for me when we're done. Typically, I'm not sure if people have seen this diagram, but this is a really popular user experience diagram. In fact, one of the original ones written by a guy named Jesse James Garrett, who wrote the book, The Elements of User Experience. And what he did here was define effectively what user experience is. So I'll take you through it very, very quickly. And really, at its core, user experience is a series of steps that lead up to something that customers interface with, that people interact with. But historically, in user experience design thought leadership, there's been such a huge focus on tactics, not the emotion and strategy that exists that enable this sort of stuff to happen. Sure, it's easy to understand. You need to understand what your site objectives are, and your user needs, and so forth and so on. But great information architecture, great information design, great visual design does not mean a valuable user experience. It means you're putting to principle some great practices on creating interfaces, but it's a little tactical. Well, this is still a very great and truthful document that explains the execution of user experience. It's very, very focused on tactics. And that's how many user experience people think about things. It's where do you place the button, what content exists on the site. Oh, you can tell? Thanks. My mouth's already trying.
No, I can't fail.
Okay. Well, I thought
it's just for.
And, I spent a lot of time making sure that I was executing in a way that applied all these sorts of principles. But as I started to move throughout my career and realize what was successful about what I was working on and what wasn't, I started to understand that there's so much more to it than just great output. So I recently got really excited by a guy named Simon Sinek who gave a great TEDx talk called "Start with Why." And the quote that he said many times in that presentation was that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And when I heard that, it sounded so simple, and I had this, and I thought to myself, wow, like someone finally said what many of us were already thinking. And this has fundamentally inspired me to think about a new process and a new practice in user experience design that I've been using since, I don't know, since my Zappos days. So the premise of what we'll talk about today is really like designing for your why, not what you're selling. So we'll start off by talking a little bit about the what. By looking at this, can anyone tell me what Zappos sells? That bug is back. This little guy. Yeah, Zappos technically sells shoes. If someone were to explain to me, if you were to buy shoes online, how would you define what a good experience is? Anyone just shout out. What's a good experience?
Find shoes that fit you.
Finding shoes that fit you. Anyone else?
Being able to explore the shoe. Watch.
Cool. Anything else?
Feeling like you're in a real shop.
Feeling like you're in a real shop. Okay. So, very interesting to hear all that sort of stuff. I want to tell you guys a little bit of a story about what we thought a good experience was at Zappos. We thought a good experience was you having to return the item you first purchased on your first experience. We hoped the shoe you purchased you needed to send back to us. It sounds kind of counter to a good experience, but what we were really, really good at wasn't mimicking an in-store experience, wasn't being able to predict what shoe fit you. We were really, really good at customer service and logistics. We really, really wanted you to experience what we were best at, and that was our returns process. If you bought a shoe at Zappos on your first time, on your first purchase, and you had to return it because it didn't fit or for whatever other reason, you were 4 times more likely to come back and purchase again than someone who bought a shoe that fit them on their first purchase. Because the experience was that simple, and that was effectively what set us apart from the rest. So when you really think about it, what people come back to Zappos for, obviously not cats, but because they're happy, because they're smiling. They had an experience that exceeded their expectations. And we were fundamentally designing to get people to do this. And we found that smiles happen more when someone had to experience what set us apart, not experience what on paper sounds like a perfect experience, or which would be ordering your shoe and it fit perfectly. Those people certainly came back, but you were exponentially more likely to be a repeat customer if you had to exchange your product. It sounds very counter to what great experiences are, but we believed wholeheartedly that that was at the core of our success, and data proved that if you did return your product in your first visit, you will come back more often than someone who new company that came out of Techstars in Boston just finished a few weeks ago called Woo Sports, Woo Action Sports, and their product, the physical thing they sell, is a device that you attach to your kiteboard, and eventually any action sport device that will tell you how high you're jumping, how fast you're going, all these metrics that they can present to you in an interesting way that will show you, how long this, I don't know what this is called, a jump, how long the jump was, how high it was. And in spending time with them at Techstars, they were so focused originally on their messaging to be focused to communicate the fact that you could jump, you could see how high you jumped, you could see how fast you went. And I started to think to them, well, that's not what's going to set you apart from the competitor who comes out a month or a year later who does exactly the same thing. What's going to set you apart is why this matters. And they started to grasp that concept and basically started to build a brand around this, around bragging rights. They believe that people are going to buy their product so they could brag to their friends, point in their face and say, I am better than you. I am effectively a better kiteboarder than you. I jump farther than you. It has much less to do with the device. And if you think about it, what a brand experience really could be, it's a very different brand to say, this device will allow you to, will measure your jumps, versus this device will make you freaking awesome. And they took that notion and created a brand out of it, came out of Techstars and sealed several $100,000 worth of endorsements and sales, and they'll be in stores very, very soon. But they're selling effectively a lifestyle. They're not selling a device that allows you, that measures how high or far you jump. That's their product, but that's not their experience they're optimizing for. So what do most fashion companies sell? What do most clothing companies sell? Anyone?
How you feel, how you look.
Yeah, exactly.
How you're perceived by others.
How you're perceived by others, or maybe how you're perceived by yourself.
Yeah.
Effectively, the belief that I have in my years with working in fashion is that it's what you believe you see when you look in the mirror. It's effectively you're buying confidence, which then is a perception that others have about you. Yeah, you could look good, but you could look good, or you could look good and be confident. That confidence comes through, and obviously, the cat analogy is a little silly, but the reality is, fashion allows you to see what you want to see in the mirror, not what you necessarily really are. Though effectively, they are two sides of the same coin. So the thing that I've picked up over time is that why you sell effectively has implications on all the design decisions you make. It's not just about your brand, it's about what you're doing to have people experience what sets you apart from everybody else. So I like to think about it this way. You could design a beautiful tree, but if your roots are rotten, your tree's going to fall down, right? And making sure that you have nice, strong roots. By the way, I'm sorry, I didn't plan to use a pointer, but since it's here, I'm kind of fun with it. But if you could design a beautiful interface, but if it's not grounded in the right things, if the soil's rotting that causes the roots to rot, your tree's going to tip over. And I know it's not necessarily a literal analogy, but the reality is, it's down here what really allows this to be great in the long term. It's what allows great design and great experiences to shine through in the long run. And more lately, you see more folks in user experience talking about this thing called value, right? And of course, your product needs to be findable, it needs to be usable, it needs to be everything you see around this honeycomb. But this honeycomb also falls apart if the product you're selling actually is not something of value to your end user and to your customers. There's too much detail in here for me to go through, but this is effectively telling you something very similar, but with more tactics surrounding it. So the question really that I want to get to with everybody is, what is value? And there really is no one single answer to value. It's a process, it's a series of questions, it's a series of things you need to go through to help understand what value is for you, and then how you get customers to achieve that value. Because no matter what you're selling, the value is going to be different from product to product. But it always has to be accessible. You always have to be able to find it. You always have to have a website that's usable. You always have to have, good graphic design. All those things to me are commodities that just need to exist regardless of the product. But this thing in the middle is effectively what sets, products and companies apart. So the last thing I'll say before we get into a collaborative exercise, which sorry if I didn't tell everybody, but this is going to be a two-way thing, is reality is too that sometimes your roots are exposed. And the analogy there really is, think about your culture. If you were to buy a shoe from Zappos and it didn't fit and you need to return it, you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call customer service. How that person treats you is effectively at the core of that experience. That person's going to treat you the way they were trained to treat you. And if your culture isn't one that advocates for your customer, or your culture isn't one that values your customers and what they truly need, you're going to be exposing, the shit within your company. And effectively, the people who are at your company are your roots, and they need to be strong. because they are often exposed. And maybe that analogy holds true in certain businesses more than others, but your culture effectively become the roots of your business. So what I wanted to do is go through 9 questions that I believe every startup should answer before even putting pen to paper and doing real intense hardcore design. And I don't mean that terribly literally, because I think a lot of the things we're going to go through people have already thought about, but maybe you haven't documented it. Maybe you haven't really figured out how to put it to practice, or maybe you need a little help in organizing it all. So I don't think we have enough of these, but I will also, well, I guess we'll post the presentation when we're done, and you can access it then as well. But if anyone wants to follow along, I have what I'm calling this root canvas. You can pass them back and go around. And we're going to go through each of these one by one. And it could be interesting if whoever's feeling motivated, start filling this out, either mentally or literally, for your company. And I'll help guide this.
Do you have one for each, or should
no, I don't have one for
a
each. Well, yes, share a few. And I just realized I need one. So if you two are sitting next to each other, I borrow one, and I'll get it back. And we'll also post this when we're done, so you could actually fill this in yourself. Now, this is meant to be a guiding thing, but let's go through this a little bit. They're running out of a few in the back. Is there at least any in the back that could be shared with folks? But we're going to be posting this anyway, and you'll be able to do it. So I want everyone to think for a few moments about why your customers will keep coming back to you. It's effectively the emotion that you're tapping into. So if there are a few brave companies, a few brave souls out there, I would like a couple of companies to raise their hand and tell me why they think customers are going to come back to them. What's the advantage that you have over someone else? What's the emotion you're tapping into? Anyone feel brave?
Emotion?
Yeah.
Love.
Love.
If they love you, they will come back.
But if they love you, or they get a feeling, a sense of love?
If they love you as a brand, I mean.
But so why would someone love you as a brand, or love any brand?
Because you are giving them an enjoyable experience. They feel good feeling related to your brand and using your business.
But I think feeling good is definitely a right answer, is a great answer. But don't a lot of brands make you feel good?
Trust.
Trust. I mean, good. Trust is another one. So let me try to. So I'll give a quick example. I'll answer many of these questions and how we did at Zappos, and I think there's no real wrong answer here. But at Zappos, we believe people will come back to us not because of our shoes, but because we delivered to them happiness, that they felt happy after they were done engaging with us.
I think that it's more than happiness. It's actually because it's not the same thing. Like you say to someone, I like you or I love you. It's like love is so much more stronger than that. It means not only happiness, but also you have to admire the brand. You have to there are more things there that get attached to something.
Right. But we believe our belief was that our customers loved us because we made them happy. So to me, love was like the output of an emotion, of a feeling they felt when engaging with us. So for example, it's typically a painful experience to buy something and have to return it, right? That is often what's fundamentally broken in e-commerce. It's not the accessibility to the products, because you can go to Amazon and buy pretty much anything. You could go to pretty much any single shoe store that exists in America and find it cheaper than Zappos, hands down. One of the most expensive ones out there. But people came back to us because we solved for them a problem that made them deeply happy. So they effectively loved that for us. Now granted, I'm saying there's no wrong answer, but it's very important for everyone to think about the core thing that's going to get people to keep coming back to you. What's going to get them to love you? So I agree, getting someone to love you is great, but there's got to be a causation for it. You love someone because of something. So for us, what we were very, very keen on doing was getting people to experience what made us different with a lot of thought and a lot of intent. So effectively, we believe that the number one reason people come back to you is because you provide them with some core emotion that's important to them. And this got a little messed up here, sorry. So this one, I apologize, this should actually say, how will you achieve, or it does say, how will you ensure they keep coming back to you? So why is effectively the emotion, but how do you get them to achieve that why? So let me give a better example. We believe at Zappos that people will come back to us because we made them happy. How did we make them happy? We made them happy by providing and focusing on great customer service. So one is like the mechanism to the emotion. So if your emotion is happiness, well, how will you effectively make someone happy? So think about it for your business. If another brave company can think about their why, how would you achieve your why? I would like a brave soul, right or wrong, to think about it for their business and raise their hand or shout out. Again, the mechanism to the emotion. How will you make someone happy if happiness is your why? Yes.
I would say that turning their complaints into your advantage. Like when something bad happens to them,
Yeah.
so they're like making sure that we will resolve it as good as possible, as fast as possible,
Yeah.
and turn the kind of backward problem that it caused to your plus.
So turn a negative into positive as a mechanism. I completely agree. That's a great one. More often than not, companies try to avoid creating a negative experience when in fact, often the most memorable experience are the ones that could have been bad that you actually turned into something great. It's effectively, customer service is actually a great mechanism to a positive emotion. When something goes wrong and a company takes care of it for you really, really fast, is that a memorable experience for you? It often is. Now, it's not as simple as defining it. Granted, it took us a long time at Zappos. When Zappos first started, the value proposition, which effectively what number 2 is, the value proposition was selection. We believe that we could deliver happiness by providing people as much selection as possible, until every other shoe company out there started doing that. And we realized selection, just like price, is a very hard thing to compete on. So what we started to do was making sure that we nudged people in the direction of experiencing our customer service value proposition, because we believed and effectively knew that it made them happy. So making sure you answer number 1 will actually get you at what your value proposition is for your company. Like there was a few companies that I spoke to today that my mind started spinning, and I started thinking, wow, there's a few companies here that are really onto something, but I don't even know if some of you realize that there's a deeper and greater emotion behind what you're creating, and getting people a mechanism to achieve that emotion is very, very powerful. And then, of course, this is typically where most companies and most startups start. Is they build their brand around what people are taking home. So in the example of Woo Action Sports that I went through earlier, they were originally pushing really hard, talking about the features of their product. On their homepage, everything was about, you can measure your jumps, you can go fast, you could, share your data, you could store your data. But I kept asking them why, and their response kept saying, well, people get pumped, people love rubbing it in other people's faces, people love winning. And then all of a sudden they started to realize what they were creating was a platform to get people to brag to others. It just so happened that they were selling a product. How many companies in here have pivoted already? I know a couple have said it today.
I think there are a few hands.
Yeah, I see all the hands that have pivoted. You've changed your product. So I want one brave soul to tell me what, okay, you go. Tell me what you were and what you're pivoting towards.
Okay, we were trying to a funding platform where users can relate with social media interaction instead of real money. And we decided to build it because to activate this mechanism, we have to have 3 different actors: corporates, non-profits, and users. And without one of them, the process couldn't start. So now we build it in social awareness tool where you can raise awareness about whatever you care most thanks to photos. And now we want to focus on users first of all, and we want to give them power to start projects by themselves, not by putting together all different pieces by ourselves.
But your company mission sounds very much.
Yeah, the mission is the same, just raising awareness.
Exactly.
How we empower everybody to do that.
Your mission, your number one didn't change.
No.
How do you get people to number one changed? Right? What your product is changed, but your mission, your greater good remains the same.
Yeah.
I'm going to also want to call out Upendo a little bit because I think that happened as well. Could you be brave and tell me what you were and what you are?
We were working on let's say Airbnb for sports equipment. Like I have a pair of skis I use 1 week in the whole season, and I can rent to another person. But we discovered that this kind of sharing economy class is really slow, and there's no trust between people. So we moved to rental shops and put together, putting connection on rental shops with tourists.
Right.
To facilitate the rental.
So when I heard that, and I think I turned to Paolo and said something about this, like, what I heard was you're still trying to bring sports to the masses and trying to get people to, be active and enjoy themselves when they're at other locations, but you're doing it in a different way. Your product changed, but presumably why your customers will come back to you and how they will come back to you, and achieving your why effectively remain the same, but this, number 3, changed. The problem is that many companies tend to start with pushing this front and center without really realizing that there's a deeper emotion as to why people keep coming back to you. So I think when people tend to pivot, you're pivoting your product, not your mission, not the thing you're trying to change in the world. So why does your why matter? And I think you answered this right out of the gates with saying love on number 1, but effectively, in the case of Zappos, is that if customers keep up coming back to us because of happiness, well, effectively happiness matters to people. So it's a very important thing to make sure you understand what your number 1 means to your customers. If your number 1 is not happiness and it's something else, there's a little bit of research. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to understand what the end result of your customer ultimately is. I'm going to keep going, and we're going to come back to number 4 later. So, who is your customer? Today, I will say that, and I mean this in a very constructive way, very few companies were able to decisively and concisely answer who their customer is. What companies in here have actually done formal persona work? So that's 1 company, 2 people, 1 company. I think I saw 2 or 3 companies raise their hand. Could I ask maybe someone who didn't raise their hand, why haven't you done persona work? I'm just curious. It's not an accusation.
You know what's persona, by the way?
Oh.
How many of you know what's persona?
So most hands are going up that they know what personas are.
Right.
Most hands didn't go up as to persona work.
We didn't do the drawing, but we know very much all the characteristics. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the drawing is unimportant. Putting a persona on the wall, yeah, that's not right. But yeah, absolutely. Your persona effectively is the definition of your groups of your customers. So not necessarily demographics, but the personification of your demographics. So let's say you thought your customer, your target audience of your entire company was people, men 24 to 54, right? So that's your target audience. Within that target audience, you have different groups of people who operate in a different manner. Maybe, group 1, they have a set of needs, right? Let's jump into this. They have a set of needs that differ from group number 2. So one persona may, in that target audience, may be someone who's on the go constantly, is checking their email while they're walking down the street because they believe they have no time to stop and relax. persona 2 may be the type of person who listens to music while they're walking and sits in front of their computer at home in the dark because that's what's comfortable for them and that's how they access your site. And persona 3 may be, I don't know, something else. But effectively, personas are a set of needs that are personified around a name. So what often happens is, you'll see companies say that, we have patient Paul, and patient Paul is someone who is not in a rush. He's always relaxed. He doesn't really adopt new technology quickly. But impatient Irene is someone who is always on the go. She needs to be. She needs the answers to her questions immediately. She doesn't want to wait. A slow internet connection will piss her off and she'll leave. The reason that matters to you is because there are certain things in your experience that are completely and utterly out of your control, like an internet connection. And with a slow internet connection, often, not always, but often the brand is the one that gets blamed, not necessarily the internet connection. So you have external factors that impact your experience, and if you don't understand them, you will not necessarily know how to deal with them when someone complains about them. So if you were to look at this, I know not everybody has this document, but basically, customers' needs are broken down into what are effectively rational and emotional needs. Impatient Irene may be a totally irrational person who will blame your company because your internet is slow and never come back to you. Right? And that's an important thing to understand because you then may have to change your experience to maybe be less image heavy, more text driven because there's a faster download time. For someone who, for impatient Irene who's walking around with her cell phone, maybe responsive design isn't right because responsive design takes a lot longer to, effectively you're downloading more assets and on a mobile device perhaps not in the Wi-Fi range. You have to download more content, and all of a sudden, your experience is slower and lagging for that person. So understanding these sorts of things will impact the way you craft your site. So a better example would be at Zappos. Like we knew that roughly 80% of our customers came to the site knowing pretty close to exactly what they wanted. 80%. So they knew they wanted, this Lacoste shoe, or they wanted a Nike high top or a black high heel. Those 80%, we crafted an experience because 80% of our customers knew what they wanted. The 20% who were there to window shop, we effectively did not pay attention to them. And we said, we can't be all things to all people. We're going to focus our experience around the 80% that effectively make us money. Now, granted, we did tackle that 20% with a different brand, but we did not muddy the waters of our brand because we knew our personas inside and out, and we knew that 80% was our lifeblood. And we knew that every 100 milliseconds, that's what, 1/10 of a second, I'm not good at math, 1/10 of a second decrease in site speed would reduce conversion by about 1%. So a very hard to perceive slowdown in the site speed means you lost a lot of money. Amazon saw the same thing, and they're pretty famous for publishing that wildly, and they happen to be the company that acquired us. But those sorts of things will dictate the type of experience you create. At Zappos, in the design community, we got faulted all the time for not having big, beautiful, extravagant pictures, having a really deep, immersive design. And sometimes I would get defensive. As a designer, I'd get defensive and say, listen, like, let me explain why. And the reality is, our customers didn't need that. Why design something your customers don't need? I think parallax is a great example of something that is 95% of the time entirely useless. Hold on. Does everyone know what parallax is?
No.
Parallax are effectively these websites that when you scroll, like, one thing stays in place, another thing moves, and you get all this motion. Well, the reality is, I guess that's like designer masturbation. I mean, it looks beautiful, you think it feels great, but what's the purpose? Maybe there's a purpose for it, maybe there isn't, but if you're not asking yourself, why are we doing parallax, and you don't have a real solid answer, you're slowing things down, possibly. I mean, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but the reality is, there's design trickery that add weight to your site. If you don't know what's important and valuable to your customer, why are you adding that extra weight? Yeah, okay, maybe there's a little bit of a wow moment, but is that wow moment more valuable than these other things that you may be causing? If you don't know, it's probably worth finding out. I think you could tell my opinion, I'm paralyzed. So another thing that I think is often overlooked, and it may sound very trivial, but is how do you actually deliberately get your customers to interact with what you're best at? So let me repeat the Zappos example. We were absolutely best at customer service and our returns process. And once we realized that that was resonating with customers, we actually performed some tricks on some customers to get people to experience that. We first, I probably shouldn't say this on the camera, but what we actually did was intentionally send a couple of wrong orders, right, to a first few-time customers. We wanted to validate the data we were getting in, and once it was proven, we said, okay, so how can we do this? How can we get people to return their product on their first purchase without sending people the wrong stuff? Because that maybe isn't effective. So on the website, we started strongly encouraging people with language and messaging to say, hey, listen, not sure what size you are? Order a size 9 and a size 10. Because you can return one easily, fast, and quickly. So what we started to do is kind of get the best of both worlds. We got people to get the instant gratification of getting a shoe and being able to wear it, but also experiencing how seamless and easy the returns process was. So it was a very deliberate experience in getting people to go through that returns process, because we were way better at that than we were at anything else, and we knew it. And we weren't trying to be great at everything. We were trying to be great at a couple of things at a time, and that's a very important thing. So, is anyone brave enough to tell me whether you've been thinking about how to get people to experience what you're best at? Has anyone thought about that? All right, brave one.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a proper answer to that, but we actually did it by implementing the gamification of user experience. Because what we are actually doing is to change a bit of the negative change the behavioral user stuff to make it use the application all the time.
Yeah.
This is one of the proper answers to this kind of question.
There's only a proper answer if that's what you're best at and that's what you're getting people to experience. I mean, the point I'm trying to say is that there's no right or wrong answer anywhere here. These are fundamentally things you need to be answering. And, well, first asking yourself, answering yourself, whether you put it on a piece of paper or it's in your head, doesn't really matter to me. But you have to make sure that you are deliberately creating an experience that gets people to achieve everything that's here. If you're not, what are you doing? Creating a beautiful website so you and all your friends can chat? No, that's not what this is about. You all are taking money from investors and trying to create real value in the world. Real value happens here, not just with beautiful, visually beautiful and stimulating things.
Can I ask something? So, what if the thing that you're best at is eliminating something from their lives? So, for instance, if you save someone time, then they're not experiencing an actual action. They're experiencing like the absence of having to do something else.
Right.
So in this case, I mean, you could, for instance, you could tell them, hey, you saved 10 hours of your time this week.
Okay.
Or something like that. But,
yeah. So let me ask you a question, then I'll answer it. What's the value of saving time?
having time to do other things.
Ah, okay. So to me, I want to go back to number one. Then how would you answer what your number one is? Like, why are customers coming back to you?
Well, let's say like relief. The relief of having to do something that they really don't want to do.
Okay. Cool. So I think that's a great answer. So how do you get people to save time? I mean, perhaps it's a matter of creating, like, this may be a little tactical. Maybe it's creating an experience that shoves people down a certain path. Maybe it's removing every single feature that doesn't save people time. If it doesn't save people time, maybe it doesn't belong on your site. Okay, I'm just going to pick on big, beautiful images. And again, as a designer, I like images, but like, if a slower site, does a slower site save you time or not? Probably doesn't. So maybe it's about a lighter site. Maybe there's a removal of features. Let me go into the next question and see if that helps it. The question is, what will you not do for your customers? So you pose a very good question. I want to talk a little bit about that, maybe one-on-one. It's a hard one to answer. And if it were that easy, probably everyone would be creating your product, your experience. But another thing you really should be thinking about is what will you not do for customers? I believe it's an incredibly important thing when crafting an experience to draw some boundaries and make sure you are very, very clear and deliberate in what you are not going to do for your customers. Are you, like at Zappos, we let people return a shoe even if their dog chewed it apart once. We will never do that a second time. We had some hard and steadfast rules on what we would not do for customers. We would do pretty much anything, but there are certain things we would not do. Has anyone here thought about where their boundaries are for what they would and would not do for customers? Think about it. You don't have to answer it right now, but it's an equally as important question as it is what will you do for customers. Let me tell you a little bit of a story. We wouldn't let people return their shoes after their dog ate it twice, but if you called us up and you passed the 1 year mark on when you could do a return, because we allowed people to return for 1 year, and you tell us, listen, I forgot I had these, they were sitting in a closet, and my husband, this is not me talking, this is a customer talking, passed away, and I need to get this stuff out of my house, it hurts me to keep it. We took that shoe back and we sent that person flowers to that person's wake. Right? We went out of the way to do everything we can to make that customer happy, make them feel a little better, a little good, not bad about having to call us up and do that sort of thing. But we also knew where the boundaries were and what we would not do for our customers. It's a very important thing to think about. And arguably one of the most important things to do before you start designing and crafting any experience is determining what it is that will make you know whether you succeeded or not. Another way to say it is your metrics. And it's all too often that companies and products launch without having a clear definition of what it is that success is. It's probably not a few positive tweets. It's probably not a few positive emails. It's probably not a usability study where someone said, this is great, keep doing what you're doing. It's a set of well-defined metrics that effectively give you a real good sense on if what you're designing is actually satisfying your core customer need. I've seen in e-commerce so many companies talk about conversion rates. And granted, it depends on how you define conversion, but typically in e-commerce, conversion is defined as the users who come to your site relative to a set of people who buy in that session, right? So that's a conversion rate. In e-commerce, the average conversion rate's 3%. I think it's a terrible metric to look at to determine if you're being successful. What does conversion rate tell you? Not too much about the health of your business. You want to increase your conversion rates in e-commerce, lower your prices. That's not necessarily feasible for your business. But what possibly is a better metric, not definite, but possibly, is lifetime value. Lifetime value is going to tell you, A, it gives you the propensity to understand if people are coming back, and B, gives you a good idea as if you're providing value for them. If you're not getting value, you're not coming back. So think about metrics, in two ways. Think about them in the long term, and think about them not in the short term, but in very small doses. So if you're set on conversion rate being a metric, maybe think about something differently. Maybe break conversion rate down into much smaller, easier chunks to manage. So one of the things that I was really bullish on when I was at Jambara was trying, which was one of the companies that at that before doing what I'm doing now, was they were so focused on conversion when I started, and I said, listen guys, how are we going to know if anything we're changing on the site is having a material impact on conversion when our conversion rate was 0.75%? So I want to spend all this time, energy, and money developing new features to go from 0.75% to 0.76% and hope that that sticks. Sounds like a lot of wasted time. But I was able to convince them to think about conversion in a much different way. how many people who came to our site effectively signed up for an email? Then what's the length of time from signing up for to an email to get that customer to activate? So you start breaking conversion down into much smaller bits. Again, conversion is just one example, and I'm not sure what everyone's metrics here are, but if your metrics are big, make them smaller. The smaller they are, the easier they are to affect. And if you affect these smaller metrics, they effectively do boil up to bigger metric. And you actually will feel happier when you see smaller metrics increase more than bigger metrics barely increasing. There's a psychological aspect to that as well. Not enough e-commerce companies, or many companies in my opinion, are focused on bounce rate. I think bounce rate is one of the most important metrics you could think of on a website. Bounce rate basically means the percentage of folks who came to your site and left without doing a darn thing, right? That's where the overwhelming majority of your people go. Why focus on a conversion rate number that is so hard to affect when you're eliminating such a huge percentage of your audience anyway? If you can increase your if you can change your bounce rate from 50% to 45%, in the long term, it's going to increase your conversion rate anyway, and you're going to be happier because you saw a smaller metric increase in a greater scale. So, does anyone here have any metrics they want to share? Don't be bashful. One company has one metric. If not, I think, hell, there's something to be worried about.
Yeah.
No metrics? Cool. If anyone wants to talk about metrics,
Not that cool, actually.
What's that?
Not that.
Not that cool.
No.
Point being, listen, I'm not here to pull anyone out. The point is, it's very easy to overlook this sort of stuff. When I started my own company, and I participated in many startups, but 2 times started my own company. I'm on my second one now. My first one, I did not follow much of my own advice, and I wound up basically flopping and having to sell the company because I did not think about much of this. I got so caught up in this that I wasn't even able to step away and see see everything that was going on. I was stuck on one thing, and that was getting this product out the door that I forgot why I started it. And that was to introduce, was to get people excited about education. I forgot about it. I didn't look at my metrics correctly. I didn't think about all the important things that make a successful product successful. And it's very rarely this. If it were this, all of you who pivoted wouldn't be here anymore. And that's a reality. You pivoted because there's a greater meaning to what you're doing. So I think that's a very smart thing to keep in mind. So the sheet that I handed around to all of you, to 1/3 of you, is going to be online digitally, or we'll email it around. However, we'll disseminate this information. This has a little bit more information than the question that just asked you. Certain things to help nudge you along in answering these. Now, I'm not saying this is the thing you must fill out to solve all your problems. It's important things to think about. You may want to augment it for your own needs. You may want to totally change it. You may pull this up into a paper airplane and throw it out the window and say Brian's full of shit, which is totally fine. This has worked, quite well in many of the organizations I have been with. And when I ignored much of this, I've flopped. Not a universal statement, but this is what's affected me. And when I focus on this sort of stuff at the other startups I've been at, we've found some more success. And sometimes we've done this formally, other times we've done it informally. But to recap, you start with an emotion, you have a mechanism to achieve the emotion. Your product is a physical thing people are interacting with. You have a hook that gets people to come back. But who are those people? Their customers must be defined and broken out. I'm not saying break them out into 3 groups. It's a place to start. 2 groups is better than 1 group. That's definitely a start. If you're not exactly sure how to develop personas, take your target audience, chop them in half, and maybe start with male-female. The point here is start. And start to think about your customers in a smaller manner. The reality is you can't target everybody. The smaller group of people you're targeting, the higher likelihood of success you will have. What's that one thing you could do to get people to experience what's going to set you apart from the rest? I guess what I call the anti-feature. What's the thing you're never going to do for your customers? And of course, how the hell do you know if you're winning or losing? Hopefully winning. That would be pretty good. I know I went through a lot of things quickly, perhaps in some cases didn't give the best example, so why don't we, if everyone's feeling brave, talk about this a little bit. Ask me some questions if you have any. If you don't like anything I said, I'd actually like to know that. My point here is not to be preachy. I'm sharing with you what's worked for me most of the time. When I forgot to do this, I failed. Everybody's different. Perhaps there's at least one thing you could take away from here. That would be making me happy, even if you don't take all 9 of these things away. Everything's debatable. Everybody has a different way of running businesses, but these are things that I, more often than not, answer before I will wireframe anything, before I will design anything concretely. So, fire away. Got any questions? Fold it up, throw the paper at me, that's fine too. I'll take that as a hint. Not a positive hint. But... Any questions? Okay.
I have a question about personas, how method works. Because when we are starting building the new personas after the pivot, we started from people who, so is it right we should make first interviews or the second interview?
Yeah.
I don't know, imagine and start what
yeah. I think the best way to start personas is to first start by creating ad hoc personas, which basically means taking your best guess at it, knowing what you know. If you have the time and the budget and the energy to do research to create these things, which could mean going out on the street and stopping 100 people and talking to them, sending an email to all your friends, whatever it is, just do it. Somewhere to start is more important than doing it perfectly right. The point is that in the long term, you're going to want to back your personas up with research, but to start, imagining segments of your target is better than trying to be all things to all people. Even if you yourself become a persona, it's a place to start.
The personas are very specific in a way, like they like which brands they love.
That's a huge part of it. I think, when I think about personas, I almost always, these are the 5 things I typically ask myself when doing ad hoc personas. It's I purely think about, I start off with their emotional needs, like, do they need reassurance? Do they need guidance because they're unsure where they're going? Do they need, effectively, like, what do they need emotionally to move forward? I then think about rational needs. Okay, this is someone who needs to see price first, because when they see price, they feel comfortable. Or when they see a phone number on a website, they feel comfortable. Things like that. Where will they be accessing it? Like, Group A is a group that accesses your site from work. Group B is a group who accesses your site from home. Thinking about it that way at a very high level is probably better than not thinking about it at all. Even if you're wrong, it doesn't matter. It's the practice of getting into that thought. Yeah. What's happening?
We're lighting up.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to ask about the personas. What is their place in the design process? So, for example, people start off with a persona and you just draw it on a piece of paper and you forget about it after.
Yeah.
Then it's no use of it.
Correct.
So how does it go after?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as you guys remember earlier on, it may not be the best analogy, but there's kind of root and there's a tree, right? And every feature you can conceive of should be conceived of because it's satisfying a need that the persona has. So if your personas are something you create and stick on a wall and don't talk about it, yeah, you fail. Just like coming up with a mission statement that doesn't guide your work, right? That would mean you fail. So if you have 100 feature ideas and only 12 of them could be tied back to satisfying a persona's need, my argument would be you only have 12 feature ideas, not 100. And it's so much easier to come up with all the, wow, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this idea. Right? We've all been there. I do it all the time. And then I use personas as a filter to determine should they actually happen. So it's a great mechanism for prioritizing features. But let me rephrase that. It's a great mechanism for eliminating features. Prioritizing features is a whole other mess. But really, I decided to focus here because, in the roots, because it's actually easy to make something look pretty. It's hard to make something stand through the test of time and survive the ups and downs of economies. And the ones that do, the brands and companies that do that, are the ones that know who they are, that know who their customer is, and manage themselves effectively and tightly. Not the ones who are throwing features against the wall and seeing which ones stick. Those are the companies that have a harder time succeeding. Whichever of you want to go first.
Okay. I have a question about persons as well, and
yeah.
It's related to business. So should I even come up with personas, or how should I come up with personas if it's a business thing?
Yeah.
Since there are much less companies than people, so maybe statistics won't even work.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I have some thoughts on that. I'll admittedly say that I think my experience in B2B is slightly different than my B2C experience, but I will say the short answer is yes, you should do personas. So a couple ways to think about it, and you'll have to determine if this is right, but you could personify the companies. Companies into small or large. You could break, or you could focus on manager, non-managerial sort of roles. You could focus on the mindset of different managers. So let's say you're targeting managers in organizations. Let's say that's your target audience. Well, managers are humans too. Perhaps one sort of manager is the type of person who is always checking their BlackBerry because they're on. I said BlackBerry there. They're checking their iPhone or BlackBerry because they need to stay connected. Whereas another persona for a manager could be listen, when I go home, I turn everything off, I don't check email, I balance my life and my work life and personal life well. You effectively got to talk to that person differently than you talk to the person who's constantly on email responding to you at 9 p.m. at night. That's a different sort of person. Again, I'm not saying that's right, but you got to think about it a little bit creatively within that sense.
Yeah, okay, but there are a lot of people in the company.
Yeah.
And probably all of them, think differently.
Yeah.
These things have, effects on each other.
Yeah.
So that seems a little bit.
Yeah, I see your point. It ain't easy, but the way I just explained it is probably where I would personally start thinking about it. But the reality is that there is no right or wrong way, and I'm actually very happy to spend some time talking about that individually, and maybe we could come up with some interesting way to think about it. I'm happy to do that either after this or tomorrow, totally. I'm convinced there's a way. Exactly how takes a little time.
So also in businesses, there are people taking decisions, buying decisions, right? And so one possible target for you to personalize is those taking the buying decisions. Also, these are sometimes different from the users. So you could also draw personas of your users inside the company. So there are ways. And there's no, as Brian was saying, there's no one way for modelizing each people.
Customer info.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends on your specific case.
Yeah, I'm hearing a pattern here, and that is I think it's going to be it may be wise to have a follow-up on personas. Seems to be where a lot of questions are around. And I will say this, and this has come up a few times, is that if you go through the work of creating personas, and by the way, there's no right or wrong way. But I guess I say the only wrong way is creating personas and never doing anything with them. Not letting them, if they sit on if you create a persona to check it off your list and you slap it on the wall and say we created personas, and it doesn't guide your business decisions, then you've done it the wrong way.
You know how you mentioned earlier that at first the value proposition was the diversity part of it, offered at Zappos.
Selection, yeah.
Selection.
Yeah.
And then every side, or like in the morning you mentioned that we were first ones with the pictures for every side. And then you put this up, and you realize that what we're really good at is customer service, which everybody else is bad at. Yeah. So my question is, how much of it was let's build this company ground up on customer service because we believe in good customer service, and that's what's lacking in the market, versus how much of it was, you started university and you ended up and customer service.
Yeah.
So you see what I'm
Yeah, I totally see where you're getting at. And I think you kind of sort of answered my question. Thank you, and I'll spit it back out. And I would say some of it was understanding what opportunities existed in the market that wasn't being satisfied. And we realized Nordstrom's was probably the only company that was selling shoes that even cared about customer service. It just so happens to be that Nordstrom is a brand that has stood the test of time in many ups and downs. So in when the internet first kind of bubble burst, and that was barely survived. Tony, who's a brilliant CEO, one of the most brilliant, if not the most brilliant I've ever had the pleasure of meeting and working with, basically said, I don't want to scrape by anymore. We have to find a way to get people loyal to us that has nothing to do with how much they're spending on our product. We want to be able to stand the test of time during the next crash. And in 2008, we made it through when lots of others were shutting down because the economy, took a ginormous dump. But some of it was market opportunity, and some of it was learnings on what was working and not working for us. It was a pivot. It's hard to figure this stuff out on day one. I hate to talk about Apple because it's too easy, but you're not buying their shitty software. Terrible. Their hardware is good, but you're buying the brand. You're buying the experience of having Apple. You're buying the PC versus Mac analogy. The fact of the matter is, they make generally, when you come down to the principles of UX design, they make poor design decisions in software. Yet here we are. I don't know, many of us having iPhones and keep coming back to them when in 8 months it stops working or the screen shatters. There's something deeper that we're buying, and that's well designed. That's not by accident by them. And again, that's design in the broader sense. This is not just about what things look like. This is the design of an experience, the architecture of an experience. Again, I believe firmly Apple's software design is terrible. Yet here we are, Apple fanboy. I got freaking everything. That's what a lot of people do.
Okay, let's say it's completely. How can I spread in my company? So the other group, how can this follow by other people that are working for me or with me?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can tell you what's worked for companies I've been involved with in the past, and you obviously find your own unique way. So at Zappos, we were really big on training and our hiring process. The people you bring in and the people you filter for when hiring effectively are going to set the tone for who's going to fall in line in believing what you believe in. So one way could be to create, let's just call it a hiring practice that revolves around your mission, that revolves around the values of the employee. Another way to do it could be to, on their first week in the company, they get half a day of training each day, and you or the other members of your team are explaining the importance of it, or are asking them to, come up with their own version of it. The point is, you got to get people involved in it. You can't just hand them a piece of paper and say, follow this. The more you can get them involved in helping make these decisions, the better off you're going to be. There is no one firm answer, but to reiterate, I think it's education and some interesting filtering mechanism for hiring that relate to your mission and your vision and your values. I mean, that's one thing we didn't talk huge about that much about here was your core values of your company. Again, not to keep harping on or talking about Zappos, it's just a very easy example is that there are 10 core values that the company filtered for. So if we were looking for a great engineer, a Rails guy, so human resources would screen the candidates for core values. If that person did not pass the core value test, they would not be hired, even if they were the best Ruby guy in the universe. We fundamentally said we don't want people who don't believe in what we're doing. Then we want, that's our filter. If you believe in what we're doing, prove it, and then we'll consider your skills. And it's hard to follow that method because often you're going to start getting frantic that you need to hire someone because we're falling short here, and you're going to, inevitably, if you don't have values or don't have your mission totally understood by everyone on your team, you're inevitably going to start hiring people because You needed to alleviate your stress because you just have too much shit going on. And then in 6 months, there's a possibility you have to deal with that again because you have a problem employee, perhaps. So great hiring practices around your mission, vision, and your values is arguably the right place to start. That's where I've seen it. At Guild, Group there wasn't as much of a focus, and there was an incredible turnover there. We'd get a lot of bodies in really fast, then we'd have to replace them again in 12 months, 13 months. Hey, and that was one of them. You know, I went into that job not, fully understanding what the company's values were, because I don't think they understood. And a year and a half into it, I realized it wasn't a place for me, and I had to go because I had different values than what was happening at the company. A great, brilliant company, but we just did not share the same values. Education, good part there.
This Zappos story is really interesting. Information about Zappos that I can return my shoes. But unfortunately, Zappos was not available here.
Yeah.
This is not available right now. But other e-commerce sites do the same. So
why don't they?
Why don't they?
Yeah. I can't literally answer why, but I'll tell you one of the things that we did is we considered the cost of returns as a marketing expense. So most companies don't. They consider it over like a true COGS expense. And so if the marketing budget was supposed to be 10% of gross sales one year, most companies would take that 10% and apply it towards advertising and all the traditional marketing channels. We would probably, these are fake numbers right now, we would take, let's say, 5% of that, apply it towards typical marketing tactics, and other 5% we save for the expense of returns, knowing that you're going to tell everyone you know about us because you had that great experience that made you happy. So some of it is a belief system, and I think it's very hard to get behind returns as a marketing expense when you could spend that money and see an immediate return on your dollar. That's the danger, I think, of thinking short term. We fundamentally thought long term. And many companies are optimizing for short-term conversion, short-term revenue, when really, I believe, again, not being a finance guy, I can say this, lifetime value is what makes a company win. Again, I'm not a CFO, so I'm sure it's more complex than that. That's the benefit of me standing up here. I can say that because I'm not a CFO, but that was our belief. But our CFO is really behind it, and he's now one of the main guys at Sequoia Capital. Smart guy.
It's very interesting to hear kind of things from you as a designer, because you say that everything relies on values and branding. And I think that's not the usual case.
I completely agree, and I think that design is not what it looks like; it's how you feel. And I was saying earlier, I got faulted all the time for what Zappos looked like. Didn't matter what it looked like. Didn't matter. Yeah. That was our brain.
Ask you, what is your most favorite user experience as a consumer? What do you qualify as gold standard as a customer of all the parts of it?
Uber. I don't know if Uber's out here.
Not in London.
Uber,
in Trento, in Milan, Rome.
Okay. That to me is the best. Not because of they provide amazing service, but it's the amazing service they provide relative to what I expect to happen with cab services. And will they still be my favorite user experience in 5 years? As when everyone starts doing this, I don't know. But right now it is. It's a market opportunity, and it's the fundamental care for their customer. That's my favorite right now. Then my second is probably a company called Warby Parker. If anyone knows Warby Parker, anyone here know? Raise your hand if you know Warby Parker. All right, this will be a good story. It's good when it's new. It's an eyeglasses company that sells these things online, and some people here are wearing glasses, but you all know, like, I think more so than shoes, the fit of your glasses is kind of important. You want to know what it looks like on your face. You want to know if it fits you. Well, what these guys did was they created a greater good. They started off, with this kind of like buy one pair of glasses, they donate one, so there was a greater good to their organization. But you were able to say, I want you to send me these 5 pairs of glasses to my house, which they would do. You try them on, send them back, and if you decided you like one of them, you buy them. So they would actually do their best to replicate the in-store experience by allowing you to try these things on at home at no cost. And now they're a wildly successful company with a flagship store in New York City, Boston, etc. They started purely online. Probably my number 2. But everyone's catching up to them in the States, so it's not as exciting anymore. That's what Google will be too. Okay, I guess we're done. Oh, no, we're not. All right. That's all I got to say to get questions.
Yeah, going back to the parallax effect, because I see a lot of factors, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, GitHub, their 404 page has parallax effect embedded. So, since their target is they're like another person,
Yeah.
So, for them, I mean, in that particular situation, the wow factor would be more important than 50K more of JavaScript.
Yeah.
So I mean, because I see the order here, and it's the priority here is like inverse. So.
Listen, like wow factor. I mean, parallax is a subjective. Like I picked on it, and it's a subjective thing to pick on. I picked on it because it's just as standard as having a menu that basically these days it feels like. So, and I don't generally see the value in it if it's done in a way that provides value. So if you're get a 404 and you're pissed off that you got that 404 and they give you something to make you smile, fine. Parallax is, if a parallax effect makes your customers smile, great. The issue I have is that it's just easily replicatable. Anybody can do that. And is it truly a wow factor, or is it just a mitigating factor on a shitty experience? If it's mitigating, that's one thing. If it's a wow factor, parallax all the way. I don't see how it could be a wow factor. I have seen a couple companies execute it quite well, where I would say I saw value in parallax a couple times. So there was this clothing company in New York, and I've seen clearly forgetting the name of it, crap, it'll come to me. It was a place that allowed you to do custom women's shirts. And as you would scroll, the model would stand there, and the shirt would change. It was effectively using parallax to show the value that they offer to the customer. Hey, you could have this in any color, shape, size. That was an interesting application of it. But generally speaking, I don't know, I'm skeptical. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just, if that's your wow factor, I don't know. You may have to, you want to think about other wow factors and still keep it. Cool. Well, I'm around for more stuff, questions, comments.
Yeah, actually,
punching bag, whatever.
We still have some time if you want, because yeah, we still have some time if you want. Otherwise, we close it here, and Brian is still around for one-to-one talks. If you feel too shy to ask questions now, or maybe you get some questions in 5 minutes. And so you just run back to talk to Brian. Okay?
Right. Thank you guys so
much. Let's close it here. Thank you, everybody.
I want to thank everyone here too. Like it was, this is a methodology that I've been following. It is the first time I've talked through it. I've already realized where I need to improve, largely from reactions and questions. But if you are feeling bold and adventurous, I would love to hear more about what you thought, positive or negative. It's all good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you again.